having to spend each day the color of the leaves, when I think it could be nicer being red or yellow or gold, or something much more colorful like that. It's not that easy being green. It seems you blend in with so many other ordinary things, and people tend to pass you over, 'cause you're not standing out like flashy sparkles on the water or stars in the sky. But green's the color of spring, and green can be cool and friendly like, and green can be big like a mountain, or important like a river, or tall like a tree. When green is all there is to be, it could make you wonder why. But why wonder, why wonder? I am green, it'll do fine. It's beautiful, and I think it's what I want to be. But green's the color of spring, and green can be cool and friendly like, and green can be big like a mountain, or important like a river, or tall like a tree. When green is all there is to be, it could make you wonder why. But why wonder, why wonder? I am green, it'll do fine. It's beautiful, and I think it's what I want to be.
Thank you, Marin and Bob. I'll betcha Kermit the Frog was not the only being who felt green this last week. I know I had some green moments. Anybody else have green moments this last? Yeah. Welcome to this space of many different colors, including green. So welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Utica. I'm Reverend Karen Brammer, just delighted and honored to be among you. Whether you're here for the first time or have been a member for a long time, you are very welcome this morning, just as who you are. And whatever faiths you have known, if you have known other faiths, this one is a faith that embraces your way of knowing in the world, your way of exploring and of not knowing in the world. You are welcome. Whatever stage of your journey you are on, you are so welcome. We want to acknowledge, and we do every Sunday, that this land on which we dwell is the ancestral land of the Haudenosaunee, particularly of the Oneida and of the Mohawk. And now I understand that there is an Onondaga group of women who have land not far from Clinton. So the presence of Native history and ancestral indigenous wisdom is not gone from us, thank goodness. And as long as we are able to acknowledge the presence of our ancestral, the people who came before us and those who live scattered in different places, we have a chance of understanding more deeply and belonging very deeply as well. And so if you're visiting for the first time, you're welcome to become part of our newsletter. We would love for you to know all the different things that are going on here. You can do that by signing up on a sheet of paper that's behind really against the back wall of the church under the clock. And there's also a link in the chat on the website for those of you who are here for the first time on the website. On the, language is interesting today. Online. Thank you. So I am going to invite Ken to light our chalice, and I'm going to read words from Joanna Macy. I wonder how many of you are familiar with the work of Joanna Macy. Oh, I'm delighted to introduce you to her. This is from a book called Active Hope. Active hope is not wishful thinking. Active hope is not waiting to be rescued. Active hope is waking up to the beauty of life on whose behalf we act. We belong to this earth. We belong to one another. And so if you would join me in turning to the first hymn on 1009 in the Blue Book. It's a meditation on breathing. Sarah Dan Jones, who is its composer, is a Unitarian Universalist I've known for a long time in New Hampshire. And when she was a music leader for General Assemblies a couple of years in a row, so she was leading 8,000 people in music. And this song has to do with breathing and meditating and being quiet. But if you can imagine a person who's about this high, she's like a firecracker of energy. And this is a song that came right out of her spirit. And so please rise when you're ready and able in body or spirit, or both. He's going to play it once through. That's it. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. And I'll introduce you to another part that we'll add to it. And we won't do all three because I'm just not brave today. Little Green. I think it's easy to sing breathe in, breathe out. And so, Bob, would you play just those lines? Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Thank you. And then what we're going to do is those of us who would like to sing what we just practiced with, when I breathe in peace, we'll start, and the breathe in, breathe out people are not going to begin until I point and we get to the second. That's not a stanza. Heavens, help my brain. When I breathe in, breathe out. That's what it's going to be, okay? I'll do my best to help you. Let's begin, Bob. Breathe in, breathe out. I breathe in love. When I breathe in, breathe out. Thank you. Breathe in, breathe love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, love. Oh, you courageous and wonderful people. Have a seat. I think the reason it's so, well, there are so many reasons that it's difficult to find hope. Breathing in and out is a very important practice in remembering how to find our way back to hope when we've lost it, because so many of us lose it, including myself, on a regular basis when life is just overwhelming, too hard, things are tough. Finding our way back to hope can begin with breathing. Joanna Macy again. Active hope is a readiness to discover the strengths in ourselves and in others. A readiness to discover the reasons for hope and for the occasions for love. Active hope is a readiness to discover the size and strength of our hearts despite it all. Active hope is a readiness to discover our steadiness of purpose, our own authority, our love for life. And so we come together to learn active hope for ourselves, for each other, and for our world. Ours is a faith community. Our traditions of Unitarianism and Universalism that came together in the 60s has been rooted way back into 16th century, but more, we can taste more of it, feel more of it in the 1700s when it landed in the United States in the person of Hosea Ballou and John Murray, who I will read from. But what I want to do is tell a story from Hosea Ballou, a Universalist preacher back in the 1700s. And you remember back in the 1700s, the idea of God for those who called themselves believers was that there was a tiny little way, a tiny little door to get through to go to heaven. And that anyone who didn't get through that, and not many people did, anyone who didn't get through that would go to hell. And way back in the 1700s, way back in the 1200s, the people who were thinking differently about Christianity were saying, not so much. We think God is a loving God. And Jesus never meant to say that we were not worthy. And so, speeding forward to the 1700s, during the time in New England when there were many preachers who were really trying to get people back to church by saying, if you don't come to church, you're going to hell. If you don't do this, this, and this, you're going to suffer and suffer and suffer forever. And they thought that would bring people to church, and for times it did. But instead of that, our Universalist and our Unitarian forebearers were saying things like this, and this is a story that was actually brought down the line about Hosea Ballou. It involves a mop, and it actually smells good, but it's a mop, a clean one. Hosea Ballou would say to a person who was mopping the floor, do you, and it was usually a female, a woman, he'd say, Madam, what are you going to do with that mop? And she would say, I'm going to mop the floor. I'm going to make it clean. And Hosea Ballou would say, then you don't think the floor has to be clean before you mop it? And she would say, of course not. That makes no sense. And Hosea Ballou would say, well, then why does it make sense that a loving God would insist that you were perfect before you got to be loved by God? Oh, that's one very simple way of thinking about our universalist roots. You don't have to get all spiffy, clean, and beautiful before you are loved by God or by one another. Whatever spiffy clean means. It is so open to interpretation. I want to tell you about a brochure that is in your order of service. It's about the chalice lighters. The chalice lighters began decades ago. I'm not sure of its roots. Maybe Nancy can say more, but the brochure is about this program that has been around, and I've been a member of this for a long while, where we are asked to contribute, those of us who are able, $20 3 times a year. And thousands of Unitarian Universalists contribute, and then a couple times a year, grants of $20,000 are given to churches who need it. It's kind of like crowdsourcing. It's kind of like, you know, you're really relying on people's sense of belonging, not just to ourselves here, but to the Unitarian Universalists who are all over the country and, in fact, the world. So that when there's dire need in a congregation, or when the congregation is dreaming of doing something new, taking a risk to grow or to just live out our faith, they can turn to chalice lighters and say, we have this idea. And I asked Nancy, who has been our ambassador for chalice lighters for a while, to choose 2 stories. And these are the stories she chose. One from the Catskills UU congregation in Kingston, New York, where I've actually preached. Has about 107 members and a budget of $153,000. That's relevant because the next congregation is in East Aurora with 41 members, and their entire budget is $55,000. Each got grants of between $20,000 and $40,000. And you can imagine the impact that has on the capacity of a congregation to do more, to make its vision real. So the congregation in the Catskills decided that they're going to now need to develop their outreach in a way that helps people who are online feel very directly connected to people who are here in person. And so they asked for technology that would help communication directly between those sitting here and those online, so that we are aware of ourselves as a larger community. And that came with a very specific intention of doing outreach to young adults to help figure out how can our faith community become more and more and more relevant to young people and young adults as we move along. And so that's what their grant was for. And then the East Aurora Church is using programs that the Unitarian Universal Association has created, like Jubilee Kids and Junior Youth Jubilee, which is an anti-racist program, to create a foundation that moves throughout their entire life of the congregation, that grounds them in understanding systemic racism and living our faith well in the world. They wanted to have more and more opportunities for events outside the church for families and people of all ages to come together to begin to help create a better world and help ourselves feel connected. And so these are some of the ideas that have sprouted in congregations. We ourselves, as a congregation before I was here, benefited from twice getting grants from chalice lighters. And so I want to just acknowledge that there are among us, well, I did write them down, quite a few people who are chalice lighters. Oh, I'm going to have to ask you because it didn't stick. Those of you who are chalice lighters or going to be chalice lighters, I know Nancy Bender. Would you raise your hand? There you go. And then down over here, we've got Jack, and also we've got Kim and Ken and Branwyn are chalice lighters. So they contribute either each time there is an ask, which is 3 times a year, and a right-sized, manageable contribution that comes together with many, many other contributions. And we can create this beautiful source of hope for other congregations to spring forward with our faith in action. I want to talk about sources of hope, not necessarily because I'm the most hopeful person in the world, but because I'm committed to finding my way back to hope on a regular basis. And being among you is one of the ways that I do that best. I was drawn to Unitarian Universalism back in the 1980s, late 1970s, because I noticed some of my friends were going, and so I decided, what the heck? And what happened that day was the preacher was preaching about the beautiful hearts of the people of the gay, lesbian, transgender community, bisexual community. And I had never in my life been part of a faith community that was open to me as a lesbian. And of course, I cried and never left. And so I stayed with Unitarian Universalism. That's why I became a member, but I stayed in Unitarian Universalism because through all of its imperfections and its growing pains, we come from traditions and carry a commitment to not go to fire and brimstone, hell and damnation, you better or else. We consistently find a way in life to reclaim hope in the face of truth. We want to see truth for what it is and claim hope. John Murray is one of the first Universalists on the shores of this continent. I don't know when he landed, but literally he was in Scotland and took a boat trip over here and crashed and ended up being in Pennsylvania, what is now Pennsylvania, and started a Universalist church and tremendously impacted our Universalist and Unitarian movements here. He wrote, "Go out into the highways and byways. Give the people something of your new vision. You may possess a small light, but uncover your small light. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of others. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Preach the kindness and everlasting love of God." Those are words from our earliest Universalist roots here on this continent. Reverend William Ellery Channing, Unitarian, arguably the most impactful Unitarian preacher in the United States, certainly during his time, which he died in 1842. He wrote, thinking about, well, let me give you more context, the way children were addressed in communities of faith were at that time thought of as tabula rasa, blank slates, and you just had to fill up their minds with good stuff instead of all that emptiness. And our Ellery Channing came along and said this: The end in religious education is not to stamp our minds upon the young, but to stir up their own. Not to make them see with our eyes, but to look inquiringly and steadily with their own eyes. Not to impose religion upon them in the form of arbitrary rules, but to awaken the conscience, the moral discernment. In a word, the great end of this religious community is to awaken the soul, to excite and cherish spiritual life. Such a contrast to the times, and yet of the times. Before the 1900s, there were many, many more Universalist and Unitarian congregations throughout the eastern region of the country. I was aware when I was in Maine that there were 800 Universalist churches alone. And now there are, I think there might be up to 20 Unitarian Universalist churches in the state. But the reason this is important is to understand that when those churches were settled, they were settled so that people could get to the church in the morning within an hour by walking or by carriage or horse. So there had to be a lot of them. But it was very, very popular because it was such a positive message. Once there were cars, a lot of those Universalist churches and those Unitarian churches went away because people started cherry picking which ones they wanted to go to, et cetera. It was not necessary to have so many. Another massive change in the development of our Universalist and our Unitarian positive traditions before they came together in 1960 were the World Wars. The first congregation I served was in Saco, Maine, which began in 1827. Tucked away in its attic, I found a sign, a really large one, that epitomized the optimism of our early faith tradition. It stirred in the people who would read it at the time as a hopeful sense that with love and with God, everything was just going to get better and better and better. You just couldn't help but getting better and better and closer to God. When World War I and II happened, with death and destruction that stunned the world, that sign went into the attic. Removing that sign is very symbolic of the growing pains that our faith tradition needed to endure in order to articulate the possibility of hope, even as humanity seemed to self-destruct. And I would say it's similar to the path I have needed, and many of us have needed to be on, between a simplistic faith and one that really takes in the dramatic contrasts, the paradoxes of life. It takes time and thinking and being with others and reading and loving to learn how to manage those contrasts. Our faith needed to embrace new realities, to learn truth in all its contradictory and painful dimensions, and at the same time learn what it means to be hopeful and aware of the possibility of helping life be better. So one of the other strains of our faith community is called humanism. I believe there probably are people, I know there are people here who understand and experience themselves as humanists. And the most simple way of speaking this is to say that a humanist is not a person who looks to an other source, a god or a goddess or a greater spirit or a creator, to make the world a better place. That we understand that it is human capacity that really is responsible for making the world a better place and using our hearts and our minds in order to move in that direction. And so one of our humanist ministers, Vincent Brown Silliman, born in 1894, was already saying, but then lived through both world wars, wrote this: "Let religion be to us hope and purpose, and a discovering of opportunities to express our best through daily tasks. Religion uniting us with all that is admirable in human beings everywhere, holding before our eyes a prospect of the better life for humankind, which each may help to make actual. Now, you may have noticed I'm kind of walking us through history here, and particularly from my perspective, because when I served at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Saco, Maine, for 7 years, at the beginning of my ministry, a member of that congregation was a retired minister named Ray Hopkins. He was born in 1990 and, of course, lived through those world wars as well. He attended Tufts University, a Universalist seminary at the time. During his time in that seminary, he co-created a group called the Humiliati. They were not humble. Don't get the wrong idea. Humiliati was a group of white men of the mind who were determined to broaden the perspective of our, at that time it was Universalist faith, their Universalist faith. And so they were considered mavericks. They gathered at the end of World War II for study, fellowship, and Universalist renewal, figuring out what does it mean to renew a positive, forward-moving faith after the Second World War. What does that look like? So they studied traditions around the world, most especially Buddhism. And it was their group that first started to move the Christian theology that was at the core of both Unitarian and Universalist faith at that time. For centuries, millennia actually, before, Christianity moved more to the side to allow room for other faiths, other ways of knowing. And that's when the sources came in. You'll see at the front of our book that we don't claim one source of our faith. We claim multiple sources. And so they called themselves the Humiliati, gathered, and Ray wrote, because one of his sources was now science. God existed in that primordial ball as pure potential. He's talking of the Big Bang. Pure potential, possibility, and impulse. Not a person, not a master plan for the future, but sheer impulse as potential left to fulfill its own destiny. With the Big Bang, that impulse released through the universe as a ubiquitous, all-pervading power flowing in, through, and under the interstices of matter, impelling all creation to change, to grow, and to become. This was quite radical for Unitarians and Universalists, just in the 1960s. He and the others of the Humiliati pushed our faith to accept sources of truth beyond the Christian Bible. And I'm so grateful, because I have to say the Big Bang story, my sources include all the sources that I can absorb, all that I can read, all that I can be exposed to. And the one that is most familiar to me is the story of evolution. Because when our planetary evolution included us as a super hot mass where there could be no atmosphere, that place eventually birthed meadows and butterflies and volcanoes and earthquakes. So from there to here and wherever we're going is a place where I find possibility. Because over the long, long course of time, the earth cooled and acquired an atmosphere as the great rocks emitted gas. The scientific fact of rocks emitting gas captures my imagination and my heart. In my mind, when I sit on a rock, I'll remember that for dozens of millennia, the rocks of this planet exhaled. They exhaled, and they exhaled, and created an atmosphere that allowed some atoms to combine in the ocean and eventually be able to reproduce themselves, and then life groped to survive and eventually crawled and clawed and flew its way out of the ocean. The rocks exhaled. For me, being awake and open to wonder is a primary source of hope, and I'm far from alone in that reality, I know. There are many of my colleagues as well, who find the evolutionary story one of the most inspiring. Rebecca Parker is a contemporary who has been a mentor and a leader in our faith, and for me personally. She tells the story of how she fell into a terrible and long depression years and years ago. She decided one night to walk to the river and end her life. This was at night. As she approached the river's edge, she made out dark, murky shadows moving around, groping, dotting the riverbank. And as she got closer and closer, she saw that there were people standing in lots and lots of clothing by the riverbank using telescopes. She tried to move in between them when one of them reached out to her and said, "Take a look at this." So what was she to do? She brushed away the tears and she took a look, and what she saw was a red-orange spiral galaxy. She says, "In a world where people get up in the middle of the night to look at the stars, I could not end my life." Continuing, she says, "I can see throughout my life as I rejected sources of gift and grace, I was tried and tried again for the heresy of believing there is no such thing as the gift." She believes that life tries every one of us for this heresy of believing there is no gift. And in the trial, she says, we find ourselves confronted by grace. She said we have to witness that, in fact, we are helped by love, we are helped by the earth, by the stars, and by the spirit inside of us that is moved by beauty. The spirit inside of us that is curious or moved by surprise when we thought life was not worth living. Ours is a religion that places itself squarely in the times in which we live, in the midst of day-to-day despair, in the midst of grappling with systemic oppression, in the midst of not understanding how traditional religion will be the most vital it can be for young adults and the children of our time. In the midst of all this unknowing, ours is a faith that we look at always finding, we're looking for truth and love in the midst of all of this lack of certainty. Some of us see or experience God or goddess, a sense of spirit, the unfolding of the universal life impulse. In the jumble of life, we look at the stars, the trees, our own hands, and we see wonders and possibility. We reach out to each other and to lean on one another's journey with truth, beauty, and with suffering and hope. We tend not to see a separation between heaven or the spiritual and bodily reality and earth. Sometimes Christianity continues to carry this idea of that utter separation, that one is not able to touch the sacred, that one doesn't feel the sacred unless you're connected with that we can't see. If we're open to the beauty of life and the wonder of living, it's not always easy to get to hope, but it is possible because we believe that not everything is known. We do not assume that revelation is sealed, that idea from centuries ago, that everything that is true is already written in Scripture. We do not believe that. We question. Our questions compel us to more questions, and we learn and we learn and we change our understanding of how things work. We change our understanding of ourselves and our place in the world and in the universe. Even in the midst of confusion and lack of hope, we can experience hope breaking in where we least expect it. And some call that grace. The truth of suffering and faltering hope is part of the human experience. None of us is immune. Suffering does not brand us as unworthy or unredeemable, but it is understood as part of that which challenges us and invites us to reach out for what brings us closer to what we believe. We have to get through. And being together, we are more likely to get through, exposed to one another's experiences and thoughts, hearing from other mentors and teachers, hearing wonderful music. We're more likely to get through to hope when we are together. I'm chuckling because the hymn that I would like us to sing, that I'm inviting us to sing, is on page 1074. It's in part in honor of Harry Belafonte, who passed fairly recently. And it is also one that I've heard more than a few Unitarian Universalists say, I will never try to sing that song again. It's calypso. A lot of Unitarian Universalists have difficulty unhinging our hips and our shoulders. We're a little more stiff than is honestly probably good for us. So if you're moved, we're going to see another congregation sing this, and we're going to hum where we want and sing the refrain when we want to, one that goes, oh, such is life. You can belt that out and not have to chase the words of the rest of the song, or you can follow it in your hymn book, or you can get up and dance. And I know there are a few people who just might do that, probably in another room. Yeah, it's really quite something. We baby boomers and we who are younger are still feeling like church is a place where you just have to sit still. And I'm here to tell you, I don't think that's true. So, please, we are going to see it. Those online will see it on your screen, and we're going to crank it up so we can all hear it. And why don't you listen to it for a little bit and then just pick up where you want. You can stamp your feet, clap your hands, laugh out loud, do whatever comes to you, or sing.
We come from the fire, living in the fire, go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water, go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain, go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Oh, so is life, so is life. Oh, so is life. So is life. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Oh, so is life. So is life. Oh, so is life. So is life. Water make the river, river wash the mountain, fire make the sunlight turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain, spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around. We are of the spirit, truly of the spirit, only can the spirit
Thanks, Al. If you would just take a moment to settle yourself, check in with yourself, figure out whether you're breathing, if you could breathe some more, if it might help, just breathe in deeply and exhale. Breathe in peace. Breathe out love. We are not deluded to think that life is simple or that all will be well always. Our hurts are full of joy at times and ache at other times. We feel a deep sense of purpose at times, and at other times we feel utterly lost. May our presence together and our connection to whatever we understand as the enduring truth of life, however we understand our purpose, may we know that we are not separate from the universe. We are not separate from the great purpose of peace and love. And we are not separate from one another. May we carry that in our hearts. Blessed be and amen. We have this tradition handed down to us through the ages. Tradition that challenges and stays awake, tries to learn more and more truth. And so it is ours to keep it as vibrant as we can, to pass to the next generation and the next, for whatever creative thing that may grow in their hearts as well. It's time to collect our offering. Thank you, ushers. Go ahead, Bob. Would you read together from your order of service as we extinguish the chalice? Please rise as you are able in body or spirit. Now we will extinguish I just invented that part.
Rising?
Don't you usually rise?
No.
Well, thank you for rising today. In body or spirit, or both. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. The benediction is from another colleague of mine who died, about 10 years ago, Jack Mendelson. Please be seated. You know, part of what happens is that I get really comfortable and I start acting like I acted in the church 25 years ago, using their order of service. It's all imprinted in me, sorry. Jack Mendelson, our capacity for folly as human beings is unmatched by any other species. But so too is our capacity to talk to each other, to figure out the world, to be useful, and above all, keep an eye out for affection. He says that he's a religious liberal because, in his words, I want to take my stand with a legacy, a spirit that pulls for the positive possibilities and the human endowment. I'm a Unitarian Universalist because I want to align myself with others who are consciously striving in a covenanted religious community to explore and reveal the creative heights and depths within the human frame, one that fosters thinking, loving, and developing whole human beings. Let us dwell in the realm of possibility. Let us open ourselves again and again to hope. May it be so for us all.
We're going to close this service with a very well-known song, and our thought is layering it with I'll Sing It Once, Bob will play it, and then everybody will join us. So please feel free to join us. Edelweiss, every morning you greet me, small and white, clean and bright. You look happy to meet me. Blossom of snow, may you bloom and grow forever. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, bless my homeland forever.